Thank you so much. And thank you again for your patience. At this time, we're going to call the Town of Mangonia Park regular council meeting of September 7th, 2021 into session. Roll call, please. Here.
Here.
Here. Here. Thank you so much. At this time, we're going to stand for our invocation, please.
Shall we bow? Gracious Lord, our Maker and our King, we're so thankful that you've given us life extended to be able to care for the needs of our community. We pray, Father, that you will govern over us as we govern over this meeting. May our words and actions be in harmony with your will. May we be conscious of the needs of those in our community and those that pass through. We pray for your continued guidance, protection, and care. We ask a special blessing on the many who have lost loved ones and the hearts that have been broken, those that are ill and those that are suffering. Bring relief, Father, we pray, and may each home and each life be ignited with your love. May peace reign. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I'll pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. You may be seated. This time we'll attend to our agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or substitutions? Ken?
Mr. Mayor, on page 2 of the agenda, we're going to ask item 6A be deleted for tonight. This may come back in front of you for tonight. We're going to ask that you delete that.
Okay, alrighty, so noted. Are there any other additions, deletions, or substitutions to the agenda? Hearing none. Motion, please. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda with the 6A being deleted. Mayor and council and staff.
Okay, motion has been made. Is there a second? Has been properly moved and seconded. All in favor, aye. Aye. Pose same sign. It is carried. Thanks so much. And of course, for our consent agenda, we would normally have items that would be annotated with an asterisk. We have none of those for tonight's meeting, so we'll move on our agenda. And just before we do, the chair would like to just take the privilege of just acknowledging that we do have our state representative from our District 88, Amari Harding, that is with us, and he'll be giving us a presentation in just a moment. We wanted to acknowledge his presence, and thank you so much for joining us. So with that, we'll turn now back to our agenda. And we do have on item 4, as we begin to call the representative up, we do have a legislative update from our District 88 representative that will be presented now by Mr. Amari Harding. And thanks again so much for coming to update us.
Thank you for having me. You said that prayer earlier during the invocation about asking, the Father above to govern us as we do the governing. I have to say that prayer in Tallahassee very frequently when I'm sitting in the committee room and people are doing things that aren't right. So I'm glad to know that somebody else needs to hear that. So I'm Amari Harding. I represent Mangonia Park and many other cities and towns in District 88, from Lake Park all the way down to the Set neighborhood in Delray Beach. And this is my first legislative session, and it was quite an eventful one. I mean, with COVID-19, the pandemic, the economic fallout from the pandemic, and the educational and all the other types of impacts that this has had on folks in Florida. This is probably one of the most momentous legislative sessions that we've had in a long time. And we had to deal with a lot of those issues, and it really starts with the budget. Last year, we had about a $91 billion budget. And it looks like, or rather it looked like, before the American Rescue Plan was passed, that we were going to have a budget at about that same amount, or about $90 billion. Now, that doesn't sound too bad, but the cost of everything goes up from year to year. And that would have meant we would have had to implement some pretty draconian cuts, and that's what the Republicans were proposing up there, pretty serious cuts to things like healthcare and education and affordable housing, which is something that they have cut every year. But thankfully, because of the American Rescue Plan, the state of Florida got about $10 billion of what I like to call Biden bucks, and that saved our budget. So we came in with about a $91 billion estimate. We ended up with a $101 billion budget, and one of the reasons why we have more resources available for things that we care about here in the state of Florida is because of the American Rescue Plan. And so, with respect to some of the other things that happened there, I want to talk a little bit about, we'll call it the good, the bad, and the ugly, but I'll go in reverse. I'll start with the ugly. As you all know, that we have a trust fund for affordable housing in the state of Florida. It's called the Sadowski Trust Fund for Affordable Housing. And the idea is that when you buy a piece of property, you put a little money into the trust fund, and this money is supposed to go to fund affordable housing construction throughout the state. And it's great because our property values are very high. The more money you pay into the pot, and the more we're able to offset those high prices and build workforce and affordable housing for folks, and vice versa, right? When there's less of a need, less money goes in the pot, right? So every year since 2003, it's very interesting. 2003 was the first legislative session after Jeb Bush won re-election. So you know when politicians tend to do stuff that isn't popular. But 2003 was the first session we saw the legislature sweep, which is a nice word for steal, money from that affordable housing trust fund and use it for other purposes. And they did that from 2003 all the way up to 2019. 2019, after that, it was the first year that they appropriated all of the trust fund money for affordable housing. And in the pandemic hit. And when it got to the governor's desk, he vetoed it, which sent that money back to the trust fund to stay there, okay? So we started out the year with hundreds of millions of dollars in the trust fund, okay, that was held over from last year. We came into this year, we said, okay, this might be the year. We've got $10 billion coming from the federal government. They can't say we need the money for other things. And we've got this money sitting in the trust fund. And oh, by the way, the property market in Florida has been red hot. And so the amount of money that was paid into that trust fund was really unbelievable. And so we thought this was the year not only to get the money from this year, but also the money from last year. Well, you know, the folks, the leadership up there got tired of folks saying that they're stealing from the trust fund. They came up with a brilliant plan, or brilliant, I mean, devious. And they said, well, you can't accuse us of taking money out of the trust fund if we stop money from going in the trust fund to begin with. So what they did was, now when you buy that property and you pay that dock stamp, rather than 100% of it going into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, their original plan was to cut that amount for affordable housing by 2/3, and to give the other amount, which was about 66% of the funds, to sea level rise infrastructure and septic to sewer conversions. Now look, I believe we have to prepare for climate change, and we'll talk about what that means for this city as well. I also believe that we need, especially folks up you know, in the St. Lucie area, they've got a lot of septic tanks. We need to protect our water quality. We've got to convert those. There is no reason in a year we got $10 billion extra dollars from the Biden administration, $3.5 billion of which they put into reserves. They didn't even spend it. They just put it into reserves. There was no reason to cut the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We were able to negotiate that from a 2/3 cut to about a 50% cut. And unfortunately, that is what it is right now. And because they restructured the program to reflect that cut, it is now a permanent cut in the amount of money going into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And so that was among the ugliest things we saw. We also saw House Bill 1, or Hate Bill 1, which really limits and in my opinion, intimidates the ability of people to go out and protest. We saw this summer that law is used selectively. not against some, but against others. We also saw Senate Bill 90, which was about, in my opinion, it was about voter suppression. It was about restricting access to the ballot. I sit on the State Affairs Committee. I sit on a few committees. One is State Affairs. I sit on the two committees related to water, the environment, and agriculture. That's the Policy Committee and the Appropriations Committee, the Money Committee. I sit on that as well. And I also sit on Insurance and Banking. And so the voter suppression bill came to my committee last before coming to the floor. And, you know, a lot of senior citizens, especially if you live in a community, you're used to being able to hand your ballot to your neighbor, or you're used to be able to hand your ballot to your grandchild, or if you live in a larger family where you've got cousins or aunties or aunts, you used to be able to hand it to someone in your household and say, hey, take this to the supervisor of elections office, or take this to the drop box. On that ballot, you've got your identification on there. You've signed it, and they match your signature to the signature that they have on file. If it doesn't match, they reject it, which is what they did to Congressman Patrick Murphy. He's a congressman. They rejected his ballot because the signature did not match. That was in 2018, right? So there are protections around that ballot. Well, when it came to my committee, here's what they would have you do. If you wanted to hand that ballot to someone else to drop off at the drop box, they told the supervisor you have to have someone stationed at the drop box. But no, we're not going to pay for you to have that person stationed. It has to come out of your budget, and we're not going to increase your budget. Not only that, you have to have that drop box surveilled 24/7. Not only that, when that person comes to drop that ballot off to the drop box, this was originally what came to my committee, they need to have a printed and signed affidavit from the person whose ballot it is, saying that they empowered you to drop it off. And I asked the guy who was carrying that bill, his name is Blaise Ngolia, smart guy. If you wonder whether there are partisan implications in this bill, he happens to have been the former chairman of the Republican Party of the state of Florida. He was the one sponsoring this bill. I asked him, I said, hey, we've got all these protections on the ballot. The supervisor can judge independently if it's this person's ballot. It's sealed, it's signed, it's delivered. Why would you, and by the way, this is the key part, if you didn't have that signed affidavit, or if that person didn't have that ID, they would turn the person away and your ballot with them. So I said, why would you create an opportunity for someone's ballot to be rejected? Not because you couldn't identify that the ballot came from this person, but simply because of who brought the ballot to the drop box. If I say to someone in my family who's not my mother or my child, take this to the post office, none of those provisions apply, right? But only if you're taking it to a place that's probably more convenient to you, a drop box in your community, do those apply, right? So thankfully, when it came to the floor, that provision had been taken out of it. So we were able to water it down, but it was still, in my opinion, a bill that restricts access to the ballot. That's the ugly. Some of the bad that we saw relates to our homeowners insurance. And I'm not to that place yet where I can afford to buy a home. I'm working to get there. But we know our homeowners insurance rates are going up and up. And Citizens, while not the best, is really the only option for a lot of people. And so what they have done is made it difficult for citizens to take on more policies and made it basically easier for insurance companies to force people to accept their even higher property insurance rates. Now, Citizens is supposed to be the insurer of last resort, supposed to be able to provide affordable insurance to people when you can't get it in the private market. So why then are they banning Citizens from ever lowering rates, which is what they did in the legislation that they passed this year that came through the committee that I sat on. They also are allowing Citizens to increase rates faster every year. Citizens was capped previously to 10% increase annually. They're now allowed to increase 15% annually. And the latest news report shows that that's exactly what Citizens is going to do, right? So whether you're in Citizens or whether you're in the private market, your insurance rates are going up. And the ability that you have to fight your insurance company when they don't pay out, because we know very often insurance companies, they like to be in the insurance business when it's time to collect a premium. When it's time to pay out, it's a different story, right? And so now they've made it harder for you also to fight back. They've made it very challenging for a homeowner to fight back against their insurance company with respect to that. So that was not great. I know a lot of folks have disagreements up there in the business community and the insurance industry. They have disagreements. Trial lawyers have a say. But at the end of the day, I think things got worse for people who need affordable homeowners insurance in a state that gets lots of hurricanes. Some of the good, and this affects this city. So there was a bill called the Resilient Florida Grant Program, and we're dealing with sea level rise. You can't avoid it. It just is what it is in South Florida. And what the state is doing is they're providing grants to local governments to provide infrastructural improvements to address sea level rise. And one of the problems I have with that bill, again, I sit on all the environmental and water stuff. The main problem I had with that bill, not just with the fact that it was funded with money that should be going to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, that was one of the things that they were doing. But the main problem I had with the bill was they had a scoring criteria for cities that are applying for these grants. And at the very top of the scoring criteria was, do you have matching funds? We expect that to be important. At the very bottom of the scoring criteria, weighted at the very least, was, are you a financially disadvantaged city? Are you a smaller city? Are you a city that has a smaller budget? So here's what I presented to staff and what I presented to Representative Musada Cabrera, who was carrying that bill. I said, look, you could have two cities exactly identical with respect to their need and every other aspect of their grant program. But if one city is larger and therefore has a larger budget, they're able to provide those matching dollars. And the other city is smaller, every other aspect of the application is the same, but they just don't have the money for the matching dollars. You have two very different outcomes. So I said you have to have something in there for small financially disadvantaged cities because we exist. We exist. And I know y'all have canals coming through here. That's a part of it. And a lot of people don't realize the sea level rise problem and the climate change problem is not just a coastal on the ocean community. If you have canals, it is extremely problematic. The places that flooded the worst during the past few hurricanes that we've had down in Broward were the western communities because there was nowhere for the water to go. And they were flooded, unlike the coastal communities where that water receded. Those western communities, they were flooded for several days, right? And so one of the things that we end up getting, I saw it 3 times in committee. The Appropriations Committee, the Policy Committee, and State Affairs. By the time it came last, they had heard from me and another member enough times to where they added a provision in the bill for smaller, financially disadvantaged cities. And I believe, I've got to go back and check those provisions, that Mangonia Park meets the criteria. So that is a pot of money that y'all may be able to access through a grant application process with the state to get infrastructural improvements. It's going to be competitive. This is the first year that they're doing that. We're all going to be learning, but this is an opportunity for cities to basically get some money back. Because we know South Florida, we send more money to Tallahassee than we ever get back. And so this is an opportunity to kind of equalize that. And, you know, the last thing I'll say is with respect to how the session went. You learn a lot. It's a fast, those 60 days are an accelerated academy. And one of the things that I learned is those budget meetings that they have, and Councilwoman Green, you know, the budget meetings that they have, those meetings are just for show, okay? The real work happens in that appropriations suite. all weekend long, well into the night. And so learning how to work that process, it was a learning experience. I've learned some things, and privately we'll talk about how Mangonia Park can be positioned to get some resources. Matching dollars are important for them, but also the total amount of the ask. Even if you've got, you know, for example, if you make a 7-figure ask, it's very difficult to get, even if you've got 75% matching dollars, right? Just because the number is so large, right? But I've learned a lot, and I'd be happy to help provide insight into how that process works. Going forward, you know, we'll be back in Tallahassee week after next, the week of the 19th of September for our first committee week. And so we'll be right back at it. The legislative session in 2022 starts in January. And so, you know, there are lots of things that are going to be discussed. Property insurance is going to be back on the table again. Every year the insurance industries go to the legislature and say, we got to do this one thing every year, right? And the legislature falls for it, and rates do not go down, they go up. So I expect that to be on the menu. I expect some things that are recently in the news about women's rights to be on the menu. I expect union stuff to be on the menu for the legislature. There's a lot that's going to be going on, and hopefully we can just keep more power in the hands of local governments. One of the bills that I was able to pass reaching across the aisle with Representative Wyman Duggan was a bill, House Bill 485. And it basically, y'all know this, when you do your comp plan, you typically do it every 7 years. In between, you can do these small scale amendments. But the criteria to meet that small scale amendment definition is pretty onerous. Well, one of the things is it had to be 10 acres or less. 10 acres is like 2 baseball fields. It's like 4 city blocks. That's nothing. But you've got to hire a consultant, have some bureaucrat in Tallahassee who's never been to Montgomery Park, approve a change to your comp plan for 2 baseball fields worth of land. So what we did was we increased that to 50 acres to give you more leeway and to really save you money and allow y'all to do what y'all were elected to do, which is make decisions for your own community. So with that, I thank y'all for inviting me. I appreciate being able to represent this community. It is an honor that I cherish, and I hope to continue to do a good job. So thank y'all.
Thank you. Certainly, I'm sure there's going to be some questions, so we'll see if there's any questions or comments for you. I'll see Councilman Smith and Councilwoman Green.
Good evening.
Yes, sir.
As you started with the bad in your presentation, I'm going to start with the bad. And my question to you. Without fully knowing, can you kind of give us some insight why veto power was used in the situation that you explained to us earlier? Did he explain why the field vetoed, or can you kind of give us some insight on that?
Right. So last year with the affordable housing that he vetoed, his explanation was we needed flexibility in the budget. It doesn't make any sense because when he vetoed something that comes out of a trust fund that gets appropriated, when you veto it, it doesn't just go into like some slush fund that you get to use. It goes back into the trust fund for the following year. So vetoing it didn't give him any flexibility in that budget year. It allowed the leadership in Tallahassee to come back in the next year and take that money with less oversight. Right? Because now nobody's really thinking about last year's money, they're thinking about this year's money, right? So they really got to double dip when they swept those funds. And other things that he vetoed, I was able to get 3 appropriations out of the process. There was a $1 million public safety complex in Riviera Beach. There was a $250,000 program for kids who had fell behind in COVID to get caught up. Middle school age kids, those are the kids I used to teach, and I know it's tough to get them to pay attention when you're in front of their face, okay? When they're at home, I know they're falling behind. He vetoed that, no explanation. And there was an $85,000 program, similar thing, but focused more so on reading. He vetoed it without explanation. Something that really bothers me, and it hits home personally for me, I had a student, I taught this kid 3 years straight, all advanced classes. I did not know how poor he was. And when he was going to high school, he made some decisions that were not the best decisions. Right? And he learned from those. He completed the terms of his situation, right? And so what do we want? We want an opportunity for this young man who is years away from turning 18 to be able to expunge his record, right? Especially if he hasn't gotten into any trouble since then. We want to make that as easy as possible. Why? Because right now, if you try to work with him to get a job, what does he have to check on that job application, right? And he can't lie because his situation has not been expunged, right? So now, young folks like him and others, and leading up to this session, they're in a situation where, okay, we want them to move forward, but they can't because this one mistake they made when they're young is still holding them behind, right? So there was a piece of legislation that made it easier for minors to have their records expunged, provided that they stay out of trouble, right? Not one no vote in the House, in any committee, on the floor, not a single no vote. Not a single no vote in the Senate. It got to the governor's desk, he vetoed it, right? So it's very difficult to find a logic, right? Because if you care about, for example, people not committing crimes, then you want to give them an avenue to make legitimate money. And for young people to have that on their record, it's really self-defeating.
Also, I have a B question. In your presentation, you talked about the year from 2003 to 2019, how funds were kind of used. I don't particularly expect you to maybe answer today, but how do we go forward? What will we need to do now that we're entering into 2021, 2022, when the funds are appropriated, that they be appropriated for the right reasons?
Well, okay, that's a twofold answer. The first part of the answer is, and this was how they were selling it to us, right? They were cutting the amount of money that went into the trust fund, but then they added some language in there that said, okay, the legislature can't take from the trust fund going forward, right? So they were saying, we're protecting the Affordable Housing Trust Fund from future sweeps. But in reality, what they were doing was institutionalizing the sweeps, right? And throwing us a bone and saying, you can't, basically, that the legislature can't cut this after it's already been permanently cut by 50%, right? So supposedly, the legislature cannot go forward and cut this. But as we know, the legislature is a lawmaking body, and they can simply change that language in the following, year, right? Just like, if y'all have budget resolutions, y'all can change the resolutions that govern how y'all deal with your budget, right? It's the same thing here. The other thing is, there will be likely on the ballot in 2022 a constitutional amendment to protect the Sadowski Trust Fund for Affordable Housing. This is being pushed by the realtors. There are some internal disputes about what kind of language should go on. I don't think it's the most optimal language, but I'm willing to take it, because what it does is it restores what they cut, and it makes it permanent, and it makes it impossible for the legislature to steal those funds ever again. So I will look at the glass and say that it's half full, as opposed to nitpicking here. That's our way, and going forward, because Palm Beach County loses tens of millions of dollars. It's not a seven-figure amount. It's like a eight-figure amount that Palm Beach County loses. I think it's just under $20 million every single year as a result of these sweeps. And this is stuff that will be flowing to our local governments to help with this affordable housing crisis. So that's something that, as it happens, we gotta get a push for.
Councilwoman Green?
I have to be short because it's very emotional to me. Number one, let me say this: when you mentioned appropriation, I immediately made a note. And I want to say that first, Mayor, and I'm sure you're aware of that. I learned when I stepped my foot into the Capitol in Tallahassee, I was wondering why everybody up there wanted to be on appropriation. And when you come from a small town, and especially people of color, and we keep saying people of color, but since the older I got, I realized when you talk about people of color, you include so many other people of color. White, brown, tan, Puerto Rican, a lot of people of color, when they say color, is poor people. And people of color, black people, are not the only ones who are poor. Are not the only ones who need affordable housing. So when you talk about the Sadowski Fund, and they immediately think that you're talking about black people. No, you're talking about poor people. So when they started cutting the Sadowski funds, and when the governors decided to take the money out of it, you weren't just hurting people of color. You were hurting a lot of people. Not just colored people, a lot of people. That's point number one, and I'm not going to talk too long. And when I really sat in Tallahassee, it didn't take me a week. When I looked and saw people of the committee that made up the appropriation, they didn't look like me. They were the big boys. They were the ones who had been there a long time. They were the ones who were rich. They were the ones who had been in Tallahassee already had their little retirement set. So appropriations, I don't know whether it's the same way now, Representative, but the appropriation to me committee just immediately let me know what I was going to have to fight for, because appropriation people is where all the money is. the appropriation, the people on appropriation control the money in Tallahassee. He knows what I'm talking about. And the people who controlled the money when I was in Tallahassee didn't look like me. And it hasn't changed. So I said that to say that those are the type of issues our poor people, not just people of color, need to know. And now I want to fuss at you. And I think this sums it all. And he knows that I was upset with him. And the reason I was upset with you, sir, does not only include you, it includes, I think Palm Beach County has more black elected officials than any county, in the state of Florida. You know what? When we started the Palm Beach County Caucus of Black Elected Officials, Broward County started there because they knew we had built a power base. And I said that to say this: it's damn you do and damn you don't. We need people like you, not to tell us. I mean, it's fine. We need to know about appropriation. But we don't need people who will come to us, and a lot of us we don't understand the legislative process. We can understand a lot of it. You have to work in it. But what really, really, really worked, the Republicans knew how to work it. They got to the vote. You can come to us in the communities, you can tell us all this stuff you want to in Tallahassee. But what really helps us is that little ballot in your hand. And they knew that. So, and I said that to say this. You were one of those people who had what we, and still has what we needed in Tallahassee. And I applaud you for running for Congress. And I bless you, and I'm behind you 100%, and I really hope you do it. But see, pardon? Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Oh, I told you I got carried away. Thank you. My mayor keeps me legal. Okay, I'll stop right there. However, I hope I can say what I'm going to say then. But okay, but the information that we needed, what we need is a person who look like you, who can come back and give us the reasons and the why we need to fight like, I hope I'm still legal, hell to go to the poll. Okay, and so you have that information to give to us, to tell us why, and why it's going to hurt us if we don't. And give you a good example of that, and I'll have to shut up. When we really turned out and went to the poll was when Obama went up there, because we had a reason to go. The last time you really, really, really made us want to go get out of the poll, get out and vote, was when that happened to Mr. Floyd. See where I'm coming from? The emotions, the strategy. That is the strategy. We need more something to make us go to the poll. Don't come telling me about you got to educate them. No, find the strategy, and you had that. You have that, and that's the only thing that's going to make us do something and change this system. Because the more our young people get out there and work hard like they do, the people in Congress does something to fight them. So we need more leaders like you. And I'll end this by saying, I'm waiting for the day, Mayor Albury, where the Palm Beach County Caucus of Black elected officials, and a lot of you in here don't know, I think there are 29 of you. Well, I'm in here too. There are 29 of us. I think there are 29. And there are 29. Not one. I have not seen them. Only 2 elected officials I've seen. Behind the virus, behind all the tragedies and things that are happening in the world and Palm Beach County, is Senator Bobby Powell, Representative Omari, and County Commissioner Meg Bernard. Where are the others? Where are they? These are our leaders. These are the leaders who are supposed to be going out there and making us angry because they right now can't afford to buy or rent a house. You are a representative, what did you just say? I haven't reached the point where I can afford to buy a house.
Look, I like to joke, when you talk about who's on those powerful committees. I like to joke and say, and now it's true, look, I'm the poorest member of the legislature. Okay, and it's not, look, my wife and I, we do okay, but we came up in a generation where college is more expensive. And so we started out negative. And when you look at the experiences of people who are running things in Tallahassee, they don't have much experience. Like, well, you or I have experience just dealing with, okay, how do we this month take care of these bills? How do we keep the roof over our head, utilities, lights on, water on? And if you have kids, it's a wrap. When you look at child care and the affordability there, you look at the fact that you have parents, I spoke with the principal from Palm Beach Lakes, and he has a student whose grandmother, the only person in this student's life is his grandmother. And the grandmother's like, I don't know what to do. I'm afraid that I'm going to die if he goes to school and brings COVID home to me. And I'm not afraid for me, I'm afraid for him. Because who does he have after I'm gone, right? Like when we don't make tough choices as legislators, as policymakers, who's left to make those tough choices are people who should not have to be making these tough choices. Regular, working class folk who are trying to figure it out and piece it together when we can't figure it out and piece it together.
Oh, certainly.
Right.
No, there are, absolutely, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Right.
No, I just
So
want to
there-
end it with this. I have a nephew who's graduated from law school. He's married, graduated from, I don't give a school. Anyway, he has a beautiful son, and he has an autistic daughter who is unable to take care of herself the rest of her life. They have to take care of herself. And he and his wife and his 2 children came down to visit me during the holiday. And neither one, he and his wife, had not taken the shots. I did not know that. When I found out, I told them I was sorry they couldn't come in my house. I meant that because I was angry, especially you have an autistic daughter. And let me tell you what was this. I'm talking about my family now. And I talked to them for 2 hours, and guess why they had not taken a shot? They were getting their information from Facebook. Had the audacity to tell me in my face, and your daughter is down on the floor crawling. She's 8 years old. No shot. You got it off Facebook. That's the type of information. I should have seen 29 people like me all over Palm Beach County going around telling our people why they shouldn't be getting their information from Facebook. I don't care what color you are, okay? But I do care about people no matter what color you are. Now that's the type of thing, leadership I'm talking about for my people. And that's why I know you came to give us information, so you can take that back to Palm Beach County Caucus of Black Elected Officials. You know where I'm coming from.
Okay. Oh, great. Okay. Well, certainly, and all are very important in terms of what we're dealing with as a society. If there is any other questions or comments as it relates to the presentation, any other comments or questions? If not, I have a few if there. Okay, but I'll defer if there's any other council person. Okay, just a couple of questions. One of the things, and I try to never make it personal sitting up here, but as you were talking about the insurance situation, of course, I'm caught in that vacuum as we speak. One of the things that try and keep it from becoming too personal is I'll make it a question. Now, Universal, of course, was one of those insurers, and I'll just be straightforward. I'll put it on the record. I was with Universal, got a cancellation notice for no reason whatsoever. Nothing you've done. We're just not insuring in Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade County any longer, right? So I pressed the question, and then the person said, well, certain policies, and okay, at that point in time, it was a different conversation. What do you mean? So I guess to weed through the minutia. What's being done to ensure that insurance companies do not come into the state of Florida and be allowed to cherry pick?
Well, that's the $65,000 question. And look, for me, look, I will get personal. We had a spate of hurricanes in 2004, 2005. And I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, right? And this is the only home my family has owned. And, you know, it really did a number on our house. And, you know, I dealt with, you know, getting wet for the entire year of my time in high school because our insurance company, let's just say the insurance did not insure. Okay, and I know that I wasn't alone because there are a lot of folks you pay a premium every month, but when it comes time to come to your insurance company, they're not squaring with you, and you have limited ability to fight them, right? And so, in addition to that, they are allowed to basically cherry pick and say what we don't and what what we do want to cover. And here's the thing: you should be able to fall back on Citizens as an affordable option. But with them now allowing Citizens to raise rates
Not affordable.
higher and faster every year, your fallback option, which should be affordable, isn't much better than what you would get in the market. And so it's not making any sense. To me, the changes that they made to Citizens, you almost might as well get rid of it. Because now Citizens has all the protection of being a state-sponsored entity, but none of the obligations that a public entity truly should have to its customers. And folks in the legislature, they just don't understand it. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that the insurance lobby is very, very strong
Oh, absolutely.
in Tallahassee.
Absolutely.
And it's very amazing to see that go to work. But every year, and I'm just getting educated in this, but every year there are tweaks that get made to the insurance law here in the state of Florida. And why do they get made? Because the insurance lobby comes to the legislature and says, we've got a crisis. We would really love to lower rates, but there's this one aspect of the law here. And it's usually about homeowners being able to hold insurance companies accountable or something about Citizens. And they say, if you just change this one thing, then we'll be all right. And they did that for several years leading up to this. And every year it's a new one more thing.
Right.
And so I wish I could answer the question, honestly.
There are a suggestion, and I'm sure that this is not a new thought, and
But it's related to affordable housing because whether you live in a subsidized home or just a normal home, market rate home, you've got to buy insurance. Or your landlord has to buy insurance. And if your insurance is getting almost to the point where it's like having a second mortgage, then that puts homes out of reach for people. And that has a ripple effect if you're in the building trade, if you're in the real estate profession, if you're in local government and you need permits to happen here, you need people to build stuff so you get a tax base, that has a ripple effect. So we run the risk of being victims of our own success here in Florida. Folks moving here, we don't get this affordable housing situation under control, we don't get this insurance situation under control, there are going to be ripple effects that aren't great.
Well, and to that point, and I'll move to my next question. This is, again, just informational, and again, I'm sure you're well aware of this. One of the things that I find to be quite egregious in terms of what happens with the insurance companies. For instance, if Citizens is going to act like a commercial product, they shouldn't have governmental covering. The other thing is that, and I'm not sure how this was never dealt with, if it has not been, that if you live on the east side of I-95, right, you got to have windstorm and flood. Right? And I was born and raised in Florida a long time ago, and I've seen a lot of hurricanes. I have never seen a hurricane come to I-95 and I got to go back out to sea. Right? It makes no sense at all. So basically what it is, it's actually redlining through insurance. That's all it is. Right, making it so unaffordable that you then move out of the prime properties, and then, anyway, I won't get on that soapbox. But in terms of just a thought, in terms of committee, argue it, the point, that no, this is redlining is what it is, through insurance.
Well, so that stuff comes down to the type of product that you're basically being sold, right? And insurance contracts, and I learned this being on the committee, I like to read stuff, but man, the committee.
Yeah, it is.
But I learned that there's contracts of adhesion. It's take it or leave it, right? I don't know if I'm right there, Madam Attorney, but that basically insurance companies, their contracts are take it or leave it. So when they sell these products, these insurance products, they have to do what's called a form filing, where they go to the Office of the Insurance Regulator, right? And they say, okay, here's the type of insurance that we want to sell, okay? And they give it to the OIR, and the OIR is supposed to look at it within a period of time and say good or bad, right? And there is a woman, her name is Tasha, oh my gosh, I believe her last name is Tasha Lewis. please, I don't want to get the woman's name wrong. She is the insurance advocate for consumers in the state of Florida. It's a government position. She's appointed by the CFO. Okay. She is supposed to be able to look at these form files to see exactly that type of stuff, right? That's basically redlining their insurance products, right? To say, okay, this is kosher, this is not kosher, and have a seat at the table for the consumer. They weren't even giving her, and still aren't to my knowledge, access to the form filing before they approved them,
Wow,
right?
wow.
So the consumer's not at the table. And the insurance companies are basically running OIR. They're running the Office of Insurance Regulation. They basically captured the watchdog for the consumers. And it's not right, and it leaves you with few options, and none of it makes sense, and it's really about insurance companies making money. And look, everybody's got to make money. If you're in business, you got a product, you got to be able to make money, otherwise you'll be out of business. But at some point, citizens in the state of Florida, it's about people's homes. It's about the roof that people have over their head, and I
Well,
I go on about that.
Oh, certainly. Just another third thing to add to any conversation or argument, if you find it feasible, would be that if an insurance company comes into the state of Florida to do business, if they can't open their portfolio to every resident in the state of Florida, then leave town. You shouldn't be allowed to operate in the state. Right. Now, the other thing in terms of the good, I guess there was some good that came out as you stated. Is there a rollout date for the Resilient Florida grant? Or is that still having
I
the...
think that's effective in this grant cycle. I can
Okay.
figure out what the application cycle is looking like.
Okay.
There's going to be a lot of kinks to work out. DEP has to write rules for that. Program in the grant application process. But you'll have several bites at the apple, but I would get with somebody who understands how DEP to operate, and I'll be happy. I'll be happy.
Well, great.
In any capacity that I can, me and folks in my office would be happy to help out.
Okay, we appreciate it. Now, you made mention of another bill that came and the governor overrode it, and that was, of course, allowing people to go back after they've made a mistake, as you stated with this one example that you gave. For those type of legislations, it doesn't allow for a veto override. If indeed you got all Republicans, all Democrats saying, we like this and we're going to pass it, and the government vetoes it, in light of the fact that you have full support, this isn't eligible for a veto override?
So, let's talk about trouble and good trouble, right?
It's be some good trouble.
I'm not a Republican, okay? But if I'm a Republican that voted for that bill, and I know that it passed unanimously, and that the governor vetoed it without much explanation, or at least without a good explanation, then I'm going to use the power that I have to try to call a special session and to get my colleagues in the majority, if I were a Republican, to say, hey, we all passed this. Did our opinion change?
Yes.
Let's override this veto, but that will require being willing to get into trouble in order to do something good. And what I have found in Tallahassee is that, people who are willing to get into trouble are few and far between. I have differences with my Republican members, but I tell you, I gained respect for Mike Caruso because he was one of the few people who said, Governor, we need masks. And he said it out loud. And we know how Republicans are in the Capitol. They police their people. They are in a line. They don't even have caucus meetings.
Wow.
Okay, we have a caucus meeting every week, because we got to get our stuff together. Okay, they don't even have caucus meetings because that's
Got the majority.
That's how tight they get, right? So Mike Caruso, he went out on a limb to do what he felt was the right thing to do. There are not a lot of people up there, especially in that caucus, who are willing to buck their leadership on certain things. And we, by the way, we went back up there for a special session right after the normal session because we had to deal with casino gambling. We had passed a bill, several bills. Most of them are unconstitutional here in the state of Florida. I think they don't pass federal muster. The chair of the committee said, who's a gambling expert, said this is not going to pass federal muster, but we did it anyway because the governor asked. Right, and so this is, anyway, it's about political courage.
Okay. Right, and the last question I have is really not a question, just a statement. And I know that you understand this and you'll be fighting for it. Whenever we have amendments on the ballot, we need clear language. If someone were to say, are you walking outside today? Yes or no? Let it be yes or no. But if you were to turn left and went, and then you started south and then it confuses people because of the verbosity of the language. If we just have some clear language, right? So let's fight for that because you look at something, you start out, oh yes, that's a definite yes, and then you read the next paragraph, oh well, no, and at the end, your real intent is maybe not captured because of just the way that is written.
So what I'll say is, and this is taking me back to my civics teacher thing, we had a section on the Florida Constitution, right? And I didn't know this until I was a civics teacher when I had to teach it to the students. Florida has more ways to amend the Constitution than just about any other state you can think of. I believe we have 5 or 6 ways. And one of them is the Constitution Revision Commission. Anyone else who wants to put something on the ballot, with the exception of one other commission that's never ever used really, you have to take that language before the Florida Supreme Court, okay, for approval to make sure that it's not shifting, okay? The Constitutional Revision Commission, which is why we had all those amendments on the ballot in, what was that, 2018? They don't have to run their language by the court. So not only was their language not clear, but because they bundled many different and unrelated topics into a single amendment, people were forced to to basically choose between stuff that they like and don't like within the same amendment proposal. And in my opinion, that needs to be done away with. The Constitutional Revision Commission is an opportunity to basically get stuff baked into the Constitution that shouldn't be there. So I agree wholeheartedly. And someone, I forget who, I think it's somebody from Palm Beach County filed a bill every year to get rid of that. So that might be something. And if I remember who that was, I'll make sure to give my staff.
Well, thanks. Well, certainly appreciate it. Well, so with that, that was all I had for tonight. If there's any other council comments or questions? Okay, any other council comments?
Well, I just wanted to say, I appreciate your passion, especially in regards to the adolescent support for expungement from juvenile acts. And there's something more that we can do on our level, please let us know. Because I think it's important that we give our young people a chance, once they have learned from their mistakes, that they can get a chance to move forward and gain the opportunities that are afforded to them. So I really appreciate your passion on that, and I do hope this is not a new case, it will continue for and allow our young people to have an opportunity to get past their past.
Yeah, it's very necessary. Absolutely. Any other questions or comments for the representative? Any other new information or questions? McConnell, and then we'll end up here with Councilwoman Green.
I don't have any questions, but they pretty much covered and pretty much covered everything I was looking at. And I just want to thank you for coming and keeping us up to date. We really need that.
Okay, so with that, you have something real quick, Ellen?
I want to end on a nice note. The mayor reminded me of something, Mr. Mayor, when you brought up the contract language being clear. I'm glad you brought that up because that's what I was referencing. And people like you, representatives, and the elected officials are the ones who should be coming to us and making sure we understand the amendments and the courts and everything that goes on in Tallahassee. Mayor, I'm glad you brought that up. And I don't know how many of you take the Palm Beach Post because it's too expensive, so I can understand that. But this is this is the front page of the local section today, and I've already told our town manager about it. I was going to bring it up. Only in Palm Beach County, since you brought up the Sadowski Act and how much the governor is taking money out for affordable housing, on the front page of the Palm Beach Post today, in North Palm Beach, Florida, they are having an argument, and because the mansions on the water are upset because the people who are coming into Palm Beach County because of the virus in the other big cities. They're coming to Palm Beach County, and now they are building bigger mansions on the water next to the little mansions. So the little mansions are very, think I'm lying, front page. They're upset because they want to do a moratorium because your mansion is bigger than mine. So they're gonna do a moratorium now and pass a law that you can only build your mansion only so big,
We'll let them fight that out.
only in Palm Beach County. However, my representative is standing right before me now saying he can't build a house. Now, something wrong with that. That's the way I thought this thing should end. Thank you.
Well, and we'd just like to say thank you so much, if there was nothing else. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking an opportunity to come and update us on this and stay in the fight. We appreciate you. Okay, and thanks so much. Okay, you have a great one. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So at this time, we'll move on to our agenda. Our next item is item 4B. I'm sorry, I'm getting to 7. 4B. This, of course, is the annual audit for fiscal year 2018 and 2019. And so Terry is here. Morton, he's going to provide us an update, and you have the document in front of you. So feel free to take the floor, and we'll follow you.
Yeah, I'll just kind of briefly go over the highlights of the report and then open up any questions. And I'll follow the gentleman before me who was a much better speaker. Hit the negative spots first, and then we can circle back to the positive points.
Okay, well, that's going to be a very quick presentation, the negatives. So now on to the positives.
Well, I'm sure you're aware, this is the fiscal 19 report, so it's a little late, and the main reason it's late is you lost some of your accounting personnel during the year, and again, that also relates to the negative points I have to bring up to you. And the first one is this year, and this is the first year this has ever happened, is our opinion on the financial statements is qualified this year. And it's just qualified because all the bank statements, there were unreconciled items in some of the bank statements they were still trying to reconcile. And so it's just qualified saying that except for that one item, the financial statements are fairly stated in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And again, I think you're close to getting that wrapped up now, but we're not really expecting anything significant there, but we're just not certain until it gets done. And then the few other comments we had were repeat comments. One is, you're working on an accounting policy and procedures manual, which isn't completed yet. The financial statements were late because of the problems you had. And then also this year, you had missed doing a budget amendment, so one of your departments was over budget for the year. Now, back to the good news, is you are in fairly good financial health. You're I think one of the healthiest cities around in this area. Year end, you had $2.3 million of unassigned fund balance in your general fund, and that's basically how much money you have going forward for future years. And usually most people like to see that number at about 15 to 25% of your expenditures, and you're at 76%, so that's very healthy. If you have any storms or anything like that come through, you're in a good shape to clean things up. And also this year in the general fund, your net income for the year was about 302, which is up from 257 from the prior year. And in your water fund, your net position was right around 400,000, which is up from 360,000 from the prior year. Yeah.
What page are you?
Page 17 is the water fund.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
So at the very bottom there, your unrestricted net position is right around 400,000. Again, that's money you have in reserve for unknown items coming up. And it was about 360,000 in the prior year. And on page 18, your operating income, which is about in the middle of the page, is about 107, and in the prior year that was minus 32,000. So again, that's a pretty substantial increase there. So I mean, there's some things we need to work through due to the lack of accounting personnel leaving, but overall, the numbers I think are something you should be proud of. You're in fairly good financial shape. Anyone have any specific questions to go over?
And just going through, I actually went to the your management letter.
Yes.
Okay. And just reading through, is there any item there to be brought to our attention of note?
Just the items I brought to you before about the policy and procedures, the report being made, and the budget are the only three items.
Right, and to that, the manager may speak to this, and if we sort of, I guess, sort of through the process of losing staff and various other things that have happened, we sort of was holding our breath that we wouldn't get anything negative, but understanding that we're in the process of correcting that. One of the things, of course, that we're getting through the budget now, so at the next fiscal year, we've attended to that to try and bring somebody on board, allocating the dollars to get somebody on board that we won't have this issue going forward. So, yeah, so we appreciate that. I don't know if the manager had anything to add to that. And
That's, well said, Mr. Mayor. Once we get someone in here that can be on top of it and the rest of us check behind that, I think we'll be in great shape. And obviously, we're in pretty healthy shape otherwise.
okay. And so we get some of these items here, I won't say corrected, not on the record anyway, so we get these items attended to once we get that individual, he or she aboard. Councilwoman Green?
I'd just like to ask a crazy question, because the mayor and the town manager already, and the council know already how bad I am when it comes to numbers. And this is my first time saying this, I didn't get it until today. I want to ask you a question. As a council person and you're our auditor, tell me in a few words, how should I use this? I mean, you're talking to me now, so what should I be, if you tell me to go home, what should I be looking for? I mean, you just gave us something, no, I'm talking about me, you just gave me a book like that, full of a whole lot of numbers.
Well, in the front, from pages 3 to 9 is what's called management discussion and analysis, and that's written by the town manager. And it's like 6 or 7 pages that gives you a summary of what's in the rest of the 30 or 40 pages. That's a good place to start, is just to read through that. And it's much more summarized, and it tells you where you've been and where you're going and stuff like that.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear. Thank you very much.
Other questions or comments?
I'm just a little concerned about the comment about the bank statement. Was this, maybe the town manager can explain to me, is this a lack of receiving from the bank statements?
No, ma'am, it was just a lack of personnel. And that's how it goes, it snowballs once you get behind, you get further behind. And plus, in the last 2 years, I mean, we've really been hopping. And then everybody blames COVID for everything. But if you take a good 3 or 4 months of COVID that we aren't in here all the time, we just got substantially behind.
Also, pre-COVID, you had an issue with your bank account where someone was.
They did have some problems.
So they had to get all that straightened forward, and that got it behind, so they wanted to make sure that everything was right from that.
Correct.
And so there was some banking error.
Yeah, which, that was before, that's one of the things that led them to getting behind with the banking errors.
Okay, let's clarify that.
Other questions or comments? If I can turn your attention to page 29. Just after on note 2, item E, that last sentence. Yeah, I'm sorry, let you get there. Okay. This is right after the note 2, the budgetary information, at that last sentence for the fiscal year ending September 30th. I know we're looking back. All audits are looking back, of course. There was an overage of 53,602. Now, was that sort of identified that the reason for that was because of documentation? Was it something else, or Ken?
Misdocumented. It should have been put to a different, that was part of the roofing project here at the town hall, and the community center should have been charged to a different department and line item, but was charged to administration. Ms. Cody.
Okay. All righty. Okay. And just scanning through, those were the questions I had or comments I had. Is there any other questions or comments from the council? If not, we'll see if there's anything staff has as it relates to addressing those issues.
Nothing further, sir.
Okay, then we go back to our accountant to see if there's anything else that our attention needs to be directed to. All righty. So hearing that there's no other questions or comments. Okay, and thanks so much. We appreciate you coming and doing the presentation. So with that, we'll go now to the other part of the business at hand. Of course, this, of course, was just a presentation from our CPA. And as you can see, we're doing pretty good as it relates to our fund balance and making sure that we're a little financially healthy. And you did a great job as council to ensure that we allocated dollars to get somebody to bring the experience necessary to ensure that we can attend to these items and going forward, not have these situations take place. Thank you so much for your diligence and your hard work. So with that, we're going to go now to item 5, Palm Beach County League of Cities Committee.
Thank you, sir. Just a calendar kind of update for you. The next general membership meeting is September 22nd. That again is going to be, as of this moment, an in-person meeting. So it'll start at 11:30 with lunch being served, and the general membership meeting starts actually at 12 with lunch kind of in the background. This next meeting is in the Green Acres Community Center. That's at 501 Swain Boulevard in Green Acres. An RSVP is required, so if you do plan to attend, let Manager Metcalf know so that RSVPs can go out. The presentation is being given by Nick Uren. He's the Executive Director of the Palm Beach County TPA, the Transportation Planning, I think it's Authority is the A, and the title of the presentation is Funding for Countywide Mobility. So I'll remind you again at your next meeting, but I just wanted to get that on your calendars. Thank you, sir.
Well, thanks so much. We appreciate it. Any questions or comments for me? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move forward. Our next item, of course, is item 7A. Just as a reminder, when we approved the agenda, 6A was removed, so we're now at 7A. Ken?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council, as we've talked about throughout our budget process and workshop, staff is recommending a 1% increase to the base rate and usage fee for water and sewer effective October 1st. Also with that is a 1% increase to the fire line fee. So these are related to just the increase in cost throughout the year. I read something today that the Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach area, the CPA or CPI over the last year is 5.1%. So this is 1%. This is to try to keep up with rising costs a little bit. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have, and also, of course, it is a public hearing.
Thank you so much. Any questions or comments for the manager? Okay. Just while the rest of the council is collecting their thoughts to see if there's any questions for you. Now, the 1%, just for the record, the 1% is reflected in the budget as well?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you so much. Any other questions or comments with the town manager? Okay. Anything else, Ken?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. Righty, at this point in time, and of course, this is a public hearing, so if there's any comment as it relates to this particular item, and I'm not sure if we have anybody who's joined us via our Facebook page, but if there's any public comment, we'll take that here. And we'll just ask if we just state your name and address for the record.
Alicia Buchanan, Web 1609 East Place, Magnolia, 5407.
Hi, good evening. I'll go right ahead.
Is there anything that we can do differently to try to get to West Palm Beach any faster?
Specifically, what, the water connection, sewer connection?
Especially with another increase. I mean, with the economy the way it is, while I understand that you guys are trying to add for other charges or whatever, infrastructure and all kind of other stuff. I got my bill after coming from vacation, and I was totally numb because I've never had a bill that high. That's one. And two, wages are not being increased. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and I also wanted to see, with all the grant monies that are out there, is there anything that you guys can get from anywhere that would help to back up whatever it is that you guys are trying to collect for that increase that's going to happen in October? Because I can just imagine the elderly in the community. While I could probably rob Peter to pay Paul, the majority don't have it. So I'm not just speaking for myself.
Certainly.
And I understand that you've been going back and forth with Riviera Beach. I understand that the town has suffered a lot of expenses by taking it on a couple of years prior to us starting to pay it. But it's starting to become a hard hit.
Certainly. There are some things I can state, but I'm going to go to the town manager, as he's here every day, and can provide some insight, and if there's any other council comments or questions, then we'll go to there. There was just a question, if you had a question.
I want her question to be made clearer to me before I hear from the town manager. I want to know specifically what she's so I can know what she's referring to.
She was asking, in short, if there's any other kind of consideration or any other avenues available to help to offset the cost of the increases in our water and sewer, or the sewer specifically. So Ken is going to address that as it relates to what grant opportunities, funding streams may be necessary, may be available to us.
Really, the first point, and I appreciate your comments, I do, and I appreciate you calling me this morning and we had a good conversation, so thank you. And you're free to call me anytime. West Palm Beach. So that is an ongoing discussion. They've been a little bit slower in their discussion about that because they've had their own utility issues over the past couple of months. But that is something we desire. Over the past year, those conversations have really picked up what I consider some momentum. Up until June, they suffered their issue. Now it's hard to get a good conversation picked up from that. In regard to the grants, we've been somewhat successful recently. We did get a grant for the Bryn Mawr area to expand some sewer there. CDBG funds, that was about $390,000. We are putting in for a DEO grant for about $2 million, and that is to build a new well, a water well, and to rehab the other existing wells. Okay. So we're always, Representative Party was in here, he would verify that we're always bugging him and trying to get more out of the state. You yourself, you've been up to Tallahassee and tried to help us there, so that's stuff we're continually going. This 1%, in all honesty, that is the day-to-day operations increase. This doesn't give us much as far as future infrastructure needs. It really doesn't. This is just to try to keep up with the higher costs.
Water, sewer, and fire line.
On the sewer side, I was doing some calculating today. On your usage for sewer, 98% of that goes directly to Riviera Beach. 98%. So, if your sewer bill along this month was $100 or $115, somewhere in there, then maybe $2 of that stays here, and the rest goes to Riviera Beach. And I hope I answered some of them.
Right, and it is a very important issue, so I'll just kind of see if I can add another layer to it. One of the things, of course, is that when we met with Riviera Beach, with Mayor James and all of his staff, as Ken had alluded to initially, to have that powwow, we need to come to you. One of the things, of course, and this is just sort of old news, I'm sure, was that initially, in terms of just the impact to them, because they'd have to increase their capacity to be able to take on us as a customer? Would it be, I think we started at $1.5 million, and now it's over $2 million. And so the question would be, to sort of get right to the point, I think that if we were to have another meeting and we had a $2 million check, and I'm speaking metaphorically, if we had a $2 million available to us, we're ready, right? I think irrespective to what they're going through, they see another potential customer. They don't see an impact as it relates to financially because that's on us. We're paying for the increase in the capacity to be able to send our item to them for processing. But the biggest holdup, and I'll just state, at least from a legislative standpoint, would be the cost of it. Sometimes